For most of us pursuing financial independence, the math is pretty straightforward. Earn more, spend less, and invest the difference. But what if you could speed things up and discover a new passion along the way? That's where side hustles come in. Not only can they give your FI plan a serious income boost, but they also let you explore projects that could become meaningful ventures in your post-FI life. But how do you find the right side hustle? How do you price your services, land your first client, and balance it all with your career and personal life? That's where today's guest, Nick Loper, comes in. He's the host of The Side Hustle Show and the creator of Side Hustle Nation, and he's helped thousands of people start and grow successful side gigs. In this episode, Nick shares his go-to frameworks for generating side hustle ideas and strategies for pricing, finding the right clients, and maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Plus, he'll break down the habits that set successful side hustlers apart. If you've ever thought about starting a side hustle, or you want to make yours more sustainable, this episode's for you. I hope you enjoy my conversation with the side hustle explorer and expert himself, Nick Loper. You covering side hustles for, a decade plus now. Have you seen any changes in how people talk about side hustles or approach side hustles today?
There's been definitely a rising tide of interest in the topic for probably a variety of reasons. Number one, out of the necessity side of things, like inflation and cost of big ticket items in people's lives, housing, education, healthcare, where up until recently, you haven't really seen real wages keep pace with that. And so it's naturally, well, how else am I going to make ends meet, or how else am I going to go and earn some extra money? The other side of the equation is the proactive side, and that's probably the more exciting side. People approaching side hustles out of, what can I do? If I am dealt the same 24 hours in the day as anybody else, how can I use my free time more effectively? And this was me coming out of college, moving across the country, looking for this apartment to rent, which took up a huge percentage of my take-home salary. It was pretty stressful. And at the same time, had very little desire to climb the corporate ladder at that company. And so I was well, how can I use this free time more effectively and try and build my way out, or build my own ladder in a sense. So this, we see people tackling it from both of those sides.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And maybe just the general sentiment towards organizations no longer pretty much mapping out a 30-year career for you, and a lot of people utilizing side hustles to launch into new career paths or to build a little bit more safety and security into their own financial life.
Yeah, and I'm probably biased, but I see very little downside in practicing an entrepreneurial skill set in your off hours, where you can build some extra confidence and marketing and sales type of skills, but also hopefully build a little bit of financial security, stability, where, a lot of people are just living paycheck to paycheck. They're one layoff away from racking up more debt. It's if you had a little bit of breathing room in your budget, even if you're not the person who wants to quit their job, I can't stand another day in this cubicle, there's still some benefit to having a fallback plan. And maybe you find it just exercises a different part of your brain that you're not getting at your day job, where it scratches a different itch.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really big one that I've hearing a lot of my friends, and being in my 20s and 30s. It seems like a lot of people are looking for a creative or entrepreneurial outlet that their corporate career just isn't really providing for them.
Yeah, it can be fun just to play around with stuff. You kind of get to have a low risk experiment to give yourself permission to put something out in the world and see what kind of reaction you get. There's a certain safety net of having the full-time job. It's if this doesn't work, I'm not going to be destitute and out on the streets.
Yeah, and then on the flip side too, that side hustle can start to give you some safety and security and kind of eliminate some of the concerns over just a layoff. Because at the end of the day, if you're just working a W-2 job, you really only have one client, and you can quickly go from 100% income to 0% income through one person's decision.
Yeah, that's a great reframe to be okay, how do I get in the mindset of I'm already the CEO of my own life. I'm already an entrepreneur. But if I have a day job, I only got one client. And so it's a kind of an inherently fragile system. How could I make that a little more robust?
And then you were kind of talking about how to optimize some of these off hours. How do you feel about kind of the anti-hustle culture too? Because I feel like that's become a little bit more relevant too, where people are hey, you don't have to be creating and building and monetizing literally everything, every minute, every hour of your life. Have you found some balance with that in your own life?
Yeah, this is the challenge of entrepreneurship, is the to-do list is never done. There's always more ideas than there are hours in the day. And it's pretty challenging to shut it down, say, hey, it'll be there tomorrow. Tomorrow's another day. But you're right. There has been a backlash. It's people have just been aware of hustle culture, and, maybe the idea of working 24/7 isn't the healthiest thing for your life. And you'll never hear me advocate for that. You probably do need to be aware of is that it does take effort, and it is going to take time and energy and attention. It's going to have to come from somewhere. Like, there may be some sacrifices that have to happen. Now, if it's a short-term sprint where you have to buckle down and sacrifice, that's okay. If you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, like, it may be okay to pump the brakes and look for a different path or an alternative route there, because it's just not sustainable to be burning the candle at both ends for an extended period of time.
I agree. And I think even the financial independence movement has caught on to this a little bit, as well as it grew popularity in the 2000s. And now I feel like the movement's kind of taking a step back and being like, okay, pump the brakes. You don't have to like reach financial independence by 32. It's okay if you do, make it there by 42 and you enjoy life a little bit more. Maybe you take a different job that doesn't pay quite as much, or you don't burn yourself out working 2 more jobs on top of what you're currently working to expedite that process. And I find that at least somewhat refreshing. I think there's balance in all of that, and people are really excited to be building things on the side that do help them reach financial independence earlier. But I think you have to be mindful of how you're feeling currently on top of your future self too.
Yeah. And different seasons for all of this, where it's like, hey, if you're young without a lot of obligations and no kids, it's like, what else you got going on? If you could take a big swing for a big financial upside, it takes a little bit of time that you otherwise wouldn't spend. That might be worthwhile, especially if it can afford you years of financial independence down the road, versus just kind of what I would caution against is just going through the motions. And I find myself guilty of this still today, but it's like doing the thing that you've always done because that's how you've always done it, without taking the time to step back and reflect on what you really want and how the day-to-day is, getting you towards your goals. I remember talking to this guy. I forget even what he was selling, but he was like selling on Amazon Japan was like his little niche. And he had to make this initial product order of like $2,000 or $3,000. I was like, weren't you a little nervous to place that order? It's kind of a lot of money. And he goes, well, at a certain point, yeah, it was a lot of money. And of course I was nervous, but at a certain point you got to do something or tomorrow is going to look like today. And I thought that was like a really interesting reframe of, I got to take a swing because otherwise it's going to be monotony. It's going to be the same day after day. And so that was his way of breaking out of it.
I love that thought. So let's use that and kind of anchor on today's topic, which is launching a side hustle in 30 days. This is the challenge that I put towards you. We're going to share some insight from you and the conversations that you've had with your podcast guest about side hustles to hopefully lay out a plan for somebody. If they're interested in starting a side hustle, they can do it this month. I want to make some assumptions that this person probably already has a full-time job and that they're working towards financial independence. And really the goal for side hustles for them is to add more money to speed up the plan to eventually get to financial independence, and maybe even experiment or explore some of their post-fi passions. So that's kind of the person that we're talking to today. And I think if we're going to lay out a framework for this, the very first question I'm going to get is like, okay, well, what do I do? Like, what's my side hustle? And one of my favorite things, and the thing that seems like you get really excited about, is talking about frameworks or exercises that someone can use to generate ideas. Do you mind walking us through 1 or 2 of your favorite frameworks if somebody's kind of lost and doesn't know where to start with side hustles?
Yeah, this is the interesting thing, right? Because there's lists and lists, and we've got them on Side Hustle Nation as well. Like the best side hustles of 2025, or 75 ways to make extra money. What is exceptionally rare is talking to someone on the Side Hustle Show. How'd you come up with that idea? Well, I was Googling side hustle ideas and I scrolled down to number 34 on the list, and I just said, sure, throw a dart at the wall. Like, no, that sounds good. Let's take a crack at it. What is far more common is starting from either a point of, well, what do I know how to do? What do I know more about than the average person? What do people come to me already for questions or advice on, right? I have like some level of perceived expertise. What is it that I never get tired of talking about? And for some people, that's skiing. For some people, it's podcasting. For some people, it's, random money-making ideas and schemes and side hustle ideas. But sometimes it's starting from that point of introspection. And other times, by going out into the market and trying to figure out pains and problems that you can solve and maybe pairing those with what you know how to do. Maybe it's problems or challenges that you've already overcome in your own life. Hey, if this was a problem for me, maybe it's a problem for somebody else. And we can go through a few of these different idea generating frameworks if you like too.
Yeah, let's do it actually. One of my favorites was the Shovels in a Gold Rush framework. Do you mind talking about that one and how someone can use that to generate some ideas?
Yeah, so this comes from the great California gold rush in the 1840s, 1850s. And the idea is like, Sam Brannan, allegedly the first millionaire in California, didn't make his money mining the gold, but he made his money selling picks and shovels and axes and stuff to the miners. And so for every gold rush, a lot of the gold ends up in the hands of the people supporting the miners. And while we're not pulling literal gold out of the ground anymore, although I'm reading this like Alaska Gold Rush book, which is great right now, and very similar. It's like the people supporting those miners who are making a lot of money. But oftentimes online gold rushes or trends that you could find. So you can look at sites like Google Trends or Exploding Topics, and you're going to find a rising interest in certain areas. Like a while ago, it was like, Google Core Web Vitals was an example, which is like a really technical thing. Like, how do we optimize websites so they look nice in Google? It's like you could relatively easily, if you had a little bit of technical chops or, were willing to watch a few hours of YouTube videos, like you could relatively simply become an expert in Core Web Vitals, just as one example, and go out and sell a Core Web Vitals optimization service. Hey, I tested your site and look, it got a score of a 63. Did you know that's hurting your business, hurting you in the search results? Like, I know how to optimize it and get you up to a 99 guaranteed. For $1,000, we can make that happen for you. Yeah, that's one way to look for these different trends or gold rushes. And the reason it's important is like, a rising tide is naturally going to lift all boats. You don't necessarily have to conquest market share from somebody else. An example would be, we had a guest on the show who's like, hey, did you know a generation ago only 5% of families outsource their lawn mowing, but today it's 40%. So there's an example of like the pie getting bigger, where it's like, okay, I don't have to, steal market share from an existing service provider. There's just more demand than there used to be. And so that's one area. And nobody would consider lawn mowing a gold rush per se, but it's an example of something that is increasing in demand.
Yeah, that definitely happened in my own personal example too. Starting a podcast production company, we saw the boom of podcasting in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
A lot of business owners got into this space, and naturally we're like, okay, I launched, but now I need some help from a post-production standpoint. And as a podcaster, I was getting a lot of calls and recognizing, I wasn't using a framework like this, but I'm like,
yeah,
man, everybody is asking me about these couple of things. Like, can I productize this somehow or create a service to help people out with this? And it was definitely a bit of a gold rush that was coming on the scene with that front.
Yeah, that's a great example.
What about the sniper method? And maybe you can talk from this from like the context of your own personal side hustle.
Yeah, so the sniper method is looking at a broad marketplace. Amazon would be an example. Etsy would be an example. There's dozens and dozens of these. And instead of trying to build the next Amazon or Etsy, it's like, how can I carve out a tiny piece of this? One example was the education platform OutSchool, where this is like peer-to-peer education or like for K through 12 kids. And we've seen people teaching English classes, English writing classes, we've seen people teaching video game social hour type of stuff, which is really interesting. It's like, I only need a small piece of that. And for me, like the original side hustle was this comparison shopping site for footwear, where this is like dating myself, like early days of the internet, you would have Price Grabber and, shopping.com, like these big comparison shopping engines. Where can you find the best price on whatever it is you're looking to buy? And today that behavior has largely shifted just straight to Amazon. But, I had this internship at this like Seattle shoe company. And so had some experience in footwear. So I was like, okay, I compare that with this sniper method. They're like, how can I build the best comparison shopping engine just for shoes, right? The sole criteria was it's got to have shoes in the URL. It's like that will appear to be more relevant and more click-worthy in the search results. That was like my only marketing plan. And that ended up proving to be pretty effective because we could build, in our mind, like a tighter better user experience comparison algorithm, we could usually find a better price than these big shopping engines and help people get a better deal.
Yeah, I just saw an example of one of these today too. I was on Instagram looking at my feed, and I've recently gotten back into Pokemon. I'm a kid of the 90s.
Yeah.
And I saw this page and they were selling artwork, Pokemon artwork, but not only Pokemon artwork, but Pokemon artwork from a certain generation or region called Kanto.
Okay.
I'm just like, holy cow. Not only are they like an anime artwork company or a Pokemon anime artwork company,
Yeah.
but a specific generation of that Pokemon in that artwork. I'm like, they are just catered towards kids that were born from 1990 to 1996 from that framework.
Yeah, and they know based on your Instagram demographic profile, they're like, we know exactly who to target for this stuff. This is great. There's the advice that was given to me. This came from John Lee Dumas, hosts Entrepreneurs on Fire. He's been doing it forever, thousands of episodes. He's like, you got to niche down until you can say that you're the best, worst, and only in this space. And that's what the original shoe comparison site was. Nobody else at that time was doing it. It was the best comparison shopping for shoes. It was the only, and it was the worst. And so that's what he gave the example when he started the podcast. It was the worst daily entrepreneurship podcast, but it was the only game in town. So it was like a market of one. If that's what you were looking for, this is where you got to be. And it was the same story with the virtual assistant directory that I started and sold. It was Yelp for outsourcing companies, basically. And that was the best, worst, and only. Like nobody else was doing it. And if you can find that place, there may be other people doing something the same or similar, but it's like, even if a slight tweak to the positioning, who it's for, what audience you serve, then you can kind of check that best, worst, and only box.
I love it. Yeah, and both of these methods, the shovels in a gold rush and the sniper method, along with, you have a whole episode that you recently dropped on this. I think it's like 7 methods to generate your side hustle ideas. I'll link it in the show notes if people are really stuck on these 2 frameworks and need a couple additional frameworks. But this is great. Like this is something you can do the first week of you starting to ideate on your side hustle idea. Just go through a couple of these frameworks, start jotting down some ideas. But I think along with that, something else that you should maybe consider in that first week is just, what kind of commitment do you want to make to this side hustle? Like there are varying degrees from the gig economy to the freelance marketplace to the reselling market. What are a couple of like questions maybe people should be asking them to like actually make sure the side hustle that they are choosing actually fits into the rest of their lifestyle design too?
Yeah, you may go through this time tracking audit or time audit of like, where are your hours in any given week going? And it's pretty tedious to do, especially if you're not like working at a desk. But there's a few apps that'll help you do it where it's like, okay, start time, stop time, log, where did this hour go? Where did this time go? Just to get an honest sense of where you're investing your time today. What are your priorities today? You ask people, how much time do you have to dedicate to a side hustle? And almost invariably people be like, 15, 20 hours a week. But it's like, I don't know if that's based in any particular fact. It's just kind of like, yeah, if I had to, sure, I could dig up 20 hours. And in most cases, you probably could between the bookends of your days, first thing in the morning, last thing before night. Maybe you dedicate all day on Saturday. You find the little cracks in your schedule and you can fill it in. Probably the more important thing is committing to some level of consistency where it's like every morning, half an hour is going to be my side hustle time. Or after I put the kids to bed, that's going to be my side hustle time. And that was, for me, in my first job, it was like, get home from work, go to the gym, have dinner. And then like from 7 to 10 was like trying to build this stupid shoe thing or like try to get it, turn it into reality.
I think that's a really good thought. Like how much are you going to be able to commit from a time standpoint and when are you going to fit that into your schedule? But also like how your current schedule might dictate what you choose from a side hustle standpoint. Like if you're a bartender and you always work Saturdays, but you also want to flip stuff on eBay and the primary way you're going to source that is garage sales. Well, you might rethink that unless you really want to stack a whole Saturday between garage selling and sourcing and then go and hit your bartending job. So I don't necessarily say that should shut your idea down, but you might have to rethink parts of your idea if it doesn't necessarily fit into your current style.
Right.
Let's move on from kind of ideation and let's imagine that we have an idea now, and we're ready to really start thinking through what does this practically got to look like? What is your approach to pricing a product or a service if you're a first-time side hustler?
Oh, I love, the pricing psychology behind all of this. and I'm the person who has a tendency to price too low, maybe habitually. What you want to do, or which maybe the mistake you want to avoid, is getting yourself into a trap of, well, that wasn't worth it. I priced too low. I gave up my Saturday. It wasn't worth it. And that's probably good feedback to get. We're like, okay, so I need to raise the price next time if I'm going to keep doing this. Like and it's going to depend on what product or service that you're selling. Like if you're selling products, obviously, or services, you're kind of nobody operates in a vacuum. So it's got to be somewhat reasonable compared to what everybody else is charging in the market. Now, you may not necessarily have to undercut anybody to get business starting out. In the cases where you might is where, if you're in a business where portfolio sells, where it's like, do you have any reviews? Have you done this before? Like my wife and her partner have a photography side hustle, and this was their game early on. Like they're asking a bride to take a reasonably big risk on a pair of newbie-ish wedding photographers on their like wedding day. And so they had to start out charging really, really low. And of course, I think you probably have 20x their price over that time as the portfolio was grown, and they had some nice pictures that they could show new brides. So it's kind of how I would tend to think about. And a lot of times you want to structure it in such a way where if you eventually want to remove yourself from the fulfillment of the thing, structure it such that you have some margin to be able to hire somebody else who's as good or better than you at doing the thing to pay them, and you focus on getting more business or playing operator and expansion and marketing if that's your ultimate goal. Because sometimes you get in the trap of selling your own skills and expertise when really the customer is trying to buy a result.
That's a really good thought. And I like just the stair-step approach of just sign your first client, throw a number out there. If they say yes, and you go, you execute on it, then you reflect back. You're like, okay, did that feel right for the price point? But maybe just like always knowing you're going to increase your pricing like 10% for the next client until you start to like hear some no's from people, especially if you're in a service-based business. You're like, okay, I finally got my first no because I was too expensive. Like that might be a good indicator that you're finally starting to reach a level from a pricing perspective that is starting to come align. But I like it of just taking a step back and just like, let's just sign the first deal. How does that feel for me? And how easy was it for me to get someone to say yes to that?
Right. It doesn't have to be set in stone. And there is, on the flip side, a certain risk in pricing too low, depending on what niche you're in. I remember talking with Carter Osborne here in Seattle, and he had a college admissions essay consulting business, which was a cool example first because he niched down from like being a general academic tutor. Like, hey, this is a pretty crowded ocean to swim in, but if I niche down to this, which I really like, I think I have some level of skill in helping people craft these essays that are going to get him into top schools. But he started out pricing at like $70 an hour. And the feedback that he got from prospective clients was, not only is that low, but that's suspiciously low. And it was so interesting because he was like just trying to build up this body of work and like, hey, I've done this for myself and a few tutoring clients, but like I'm still in that proof of concept type of phase. But the feedback he's got, no, that's too low. So he had to go like minimum $100 an hour. And then when we recorded, I think he was over 200 because it's just like the perceived value of like, it's like the Groupon for skydiving. Like there's certain things you're not necessarily looking for the best price on.
That's so funny. We're both business owners, and I'm sure that you've been working with contractors at different points, and you hear like a really low number, and you're just like, "Ooh, that's putting a lot of red flags up for me." Like either they're new in business, or they don't necessarily know how to execute in terms of like pricing their business, and this is got to be a short-term run for me, or they are not actually got to be able to deliver what they're promising.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've been on the very frugal side of things, on the buying side. Oh, you can get an article written for $5, or today paying $250 an article. And it's just a mentality shift. And sometimes it's the what client is that freelancer serving? Or it's like you can go on Fiverr and have somebody build your website probably for less than $50. But if you're Nike and you want to rebuild your website, that's a huge red flag. No, nobody's going to be able to do this for $50. Like it's going to be, many hundreds of thousands of dollars to some design agency to do it.
That would be absolutely crazy if Nike just hired the $50 web developer to redo their website.
Yeah, it would be like an April Fool's type of thing. It would be totally out of context.
That's funny. What about finding clients? I feel like this is maybe the other flip side. You got a price point and you're ready to start offering your services or product. Is there a couple of like marketplaces, regardless if you're a service provider or a product provider, that you could tap into to find existing clients?
Yeah, for just about any specialized service or really any product, there's going to be a specific marketplace that is kind of the de facto place where people go to search for that thing. And again, the more niche down you can be, the more you can speak directly to the pains and problems of that particular customer. Like, I think the better off you're going to be, the more you're going to stand out and be oh, I'm looking for a podcast production service for a weekly interview show, and this guy's been doing it. Okay, let's just hire Justin because he's going to stand out over everybody else. Well, I do narrative style podcasts, or I do video podcasts, whatever it is. So that is one way. Now, it is still kind of difficult because you're banking on, you're filling demand versus creating demand, which I think is a good strategy, but it's still like, you don't have any reviews on this platform. Like, it's still a hurdle for somebody to book a consultation or, sign up to request a proposal from you or whatever the next step may be. The other strategy that I really like is trying to find the strategic partnerships or lead fountains or entry points to the non-competitive people who are already doing business with your target customers. And so we've seen, if your friend has a web design agency, like, okay, well, they might need SEO services. Would you mind introducing me to your clients? Or could I host a workshop for your customers on the SEO best practices of today or something? And so we've seen people do this online, we've seen people do this offline. We had a guy who was doing the web design type of service. Maybe it was like website copywriting or something, and going after accountant offices because they were already serving the local small business customers that he wanted. It's like, hey, can I host a lunchtime lunch and learn thing at your office? You provide the space, I'll provide the sandwiches, and I'll come in and give this presentation on, the 7 deadly sins you're making with your website or with your email copy or something. And no sales necessary. It's like, now the accountant office has already vetted you as the expert. People are saying, oh, can we book a consultation? Can you just do this for us? Because people are busy. Like, they don't want to have to send this back to their team or make notes. It's like, I don't know. Can we just hire the expert?
I like that. Those are both great strategies. Finding existing markets or tapping into some kind of center of influence and piggybacking on them with your services. And I think this works either side, product or service. Like, of course, and I think a lot of us probably intuitively know this, especially from like a product standpoint. If we're consumers, it's like, where do you buy handmade goods? Like, you're probably going to Etsy. So that could probably be a great place to start. Or like, where do you buy furniture? It's probably Facebook Marketplace. So you can start there versus the services. Like you've already mentioned Fiverr. Like, maybe it's worth exploring some of these or just doing a quick Google search, podcast production services in Austin, and just seeing what sites pop up and doing some exploration on that front.
That's an interesting point too. Do you find that a lot of the business is local, even though you could deliver these audio files like anywhere? Does the client doesn't have to be near you?
We source pretty much one of two ways. I think is probably our best front here. I'm either doing events, attending networking events in my local area or conferences, and that is a really good source of business for us. Or just word of mouth, either through people, friends, family that know me and our services, or current clients that are great referrals. So I'm a little split, about 50-50. Mm-hmm. I work half here in Austin with local creators in Austin and half across the US with other creators. And yeah, it's always fun to track back where and how someone found me, but usually it's some kind of referral.
Yeah. The reason I bring it up is it's even though a lot of these services can be provided remotely, people will naturally search, web design Phoenix or podcast production Austin, and the level of competition on the local SEO game versus the national one for that type of search is like, shoot, you get a couple reviews in the Google Maps listing and you're like off to the races, head and shoulders probably above the rest of the competition because they may not even be thinking about it.
The people that are close to my clients, this was my strategy right from the get-go. Like, I just went and visited every podcast studio in Austin.
Yeah.
If they didn't offer production services, how can we work together? And it's great because it's a win-win for them because they want to make sure that their clients keep showing up to the studio. And the best way to do that is to make sure they have an active podcast. And what better way to make sure they do that than to make sure they have the right team on the back end that keeps them consistent and going throughout. So yeah, that was my best source of referrals right from the get-go, were just all of the Austin podcast studios that didn't do production.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of that strategic partnership or finding, well, who are my target customers already doing business with? These studios. It's like
Yes.
the same thing with my wife and her partner in the photography business. Like the majority of their leads, either word of mouth, which happened way faster than I would have thought. It's like, well, brides know other bridesmaids and people getting married
Yes.
in that age group, but also the wedding venues. Hey, what's it take to
Yeah.
get on your preferred vendor list? Oh, well, you submit this application and your portfolio, like boom, done. And anytime people are booking through that venue, like here's a list of our top 3 photographers who shoot here all the time. And it's like exactly that
Yeah.
playbook.
Yeah, my girlfriend did wedding photography a couple of years ago too. Whenever we moved to Austin, and she just like checking the box with vendors, like venues, wedding planners, the caterers. Like she just met with all of those, and it was crazy how fast she got referrals because they're all kind of playing in a space. And like one of their clients would be like, "I'm still looking for a photographer."
Yeah. Do you know a florist? Do you know a DJ? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So let's move out of kind of week 2, week 3. We picked a side hustle. We have decided how we are going to price that side hustle. And we kind of know where we're going to be sourcing clients from, either an online marketplace, or maybe we're going to start working with some people that already work closely with our ideal client. Let's start talking execution. Like we're nearing the end of the month and it's time to start executing on our product or service here. I kind of want to take a step back and recognize that these people do have full-time jobs. Is there a way to balance side hustles with your full-time job and personal life?
This is where you want to be very clear about client expectations, where you're like, I'm not going to be available to take a Zoom call at 10:30 a.m. It's like I'm at the office or I'm committed that time to my other employer. So it's being upfront and maybe setting delivery expectations for the client and really for yourself. Like what's realistic in terms of what I can turn around and when I can do it. And again, it's all learning. It's all data at this point to say like, dude, that took, and of course the first ones are going to take way longer than you expect them to, but it's like, okay, for next time, now maybe I have a template that I could use. I could get it done twice as fast, but it's that learning process of how long is it really going to take, and hopefully under promising and over delivering, where you can really wow somebody to earn that word of mouth and repeat business.
And I definitely think this is just a learning process. My actual true side hustle, because I guess the podcast agency is full-time hustle for me. I don't know what you call side hustle into full-time hustle.
Yeah, you turned it into the main thing.
But I have another side hustle where I do Facebook marketplace flipping, mostly furniture, sporting goods, plant propagations, etc. And I recognize very quickly I want to put some boundaries on that. And the 2 things that I just hated doing was delivering. People would always ask me, can you deliver this? And I got a big van, so I could typically deliver, but it was always a nightmare versus someone coming to my house on my schedule and picking up. I would have to drive there. Who knows what time they're going to be available? The traffic hits. I pull in and they have a gated community. I'm trying to reach out to them on the gate code. It's like, it was always like, I map it and it's like, 20-minute drive, 40 minutes. Like, we got this. And it'd end up being like an hour and a half. So like, I quickly was like, nobody can pay me a certain amount to deliver product. And second was shipping. I just realized I absolutely hated having to go to the post office a couple of times a week to ship stuff out. I'm like, I'm not doing shipping. And between both of those, that eliminates a lot of clientele and maybe product that I could potentially play. Like I can't do a lot of collectibles because the Austin market's just not big enough to really chase collectibles. But like I said, I found furniture, especially small furniture, sporting goods, pet supplies, and like baby stuff. That stuff turns. People are always looking to buy it. It was really easy to sell, and I kind of like narrowed in on that, and it's been really helpful for me to like find some good balance between my side hustle and the rest of my life.
Yeah. Tell me about the plant propagation thing. This is fascinating.
This was hobby turned side hustle. I have probably 100 plants in my house.
See a couple behind you,
yeah. Yep. I got a couple here just for show and tell, but I have a ton over here and a bunch throughout. And I recognized how expensive it was to buy plants. And on top of that, I was like buying fertilizer and soil and stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I just need to like contain this hobby because it's got to get out of control from a cost perspective. Like, can I start propagating a couple of my plants and reselling them just to pay for itself? And I recognized that exploded. It's a really good thing to sell on Marketplace. A lot of people buy plants on Marketplace. So I propagate. I have like 4 or 5 plants that grow pretty quickly that are easy to propagate. And then I just like everyday jars, like sauce jars or random things like that. I just upcycle them as like the glass jar that I put my propagations in, and I resell those. And now I'm making a couple $100 a month. At first, I was just trying to cover costs, but now I'm just like, holy cow, this is now turning into a little bit of a side hustle for me.
I know, I love that. And it's like almost zero cost of goods sold aside from, this upcycled glass and a little bit of soil. Cause it's like, well, it just grew from this plant that I already had. I think that's like, I love businesses like that where it's like, if you can get that cost of goods sold as close to zero, I think it's really, really fun.
It's pretty much zero for me because a lot of times I don't even plant them into soil. It's just water propagations. So I keep them hydroponic. So yeah, outside of like finding a couple of really cool glass jars, and like if I go to a garage sale and they have like a box of glass jars, I'll try to get them for like a quarter each, just so I have like a plethora of glass jars. But now I have so many friends that know I plant propagate. So they're always like bringing me a bag of glass jars that they've collected over the last month or so and handing them off. It's so fun. And I really like it too because I'm very passionate about plants. Everyone always comes over and they like, can you help me like figure out how to take care of this? Like I don't want it to die. So it kind of fills a nice blend between like a personal passion of mine and making a little bit of money.
What are some of the best sellers?
Well, pothos is probably one of the best. I think it has a recognizable name. It grows quickly. It's pretty bulletproof in terms of killing it. So I do a lot of like new plant cell sales or new plant parent sales, and they always know pothos. They think it looks really cool. Like I said, it's really easy and fast to grow. So I never even have to like run out of pothos.
I'm just like looking at my local Facebook marketplace, see if anybody is selling this thing.
And I usually price them. So my plant props, they might get like 3 cuttings, and I'll sell a jar for like $5. But the thing is, like somebody comes over and they always want more than one plant. They'll end up buying 5 or 6 plants. So the transaction is always worth like $25, $30, $35 to me, which is really great too. And then once, usually on Sundays, I like to piddle around my garden and my house, and I'll do some plant cleanup, and I do all the propagations at that time, put them into jars, and then throughout the week, just sell out all my inventory.
I love it. No, there's a couple people in Seattle with pothos starters, but not a ton. So there's room in this space. Plus there's a million different varieties of plants that you can do this with.
For sure. As we're kind of concluding this conversation, I want to talk just like healthy habits for side hustlers. You already talked a little bit about dedicating some time every day for your side hustle. I also like this 3 priorities life hack that you have. Can you kind of talk through how you execute on your 3 priorities and what that's done for you and your business?
Yeah, the biggest thing, and this was another John Lee Dumas line, was, and I think it came from his time in the military, it was, win tomorrow today. Is like, instead of waking up in the morning and be like, all right, let's do this. What do we got going? What does the internet have in store for me today? Let's, it's like, no. You got to come in with a plan of attack from what you said last night, or your top 3 priorities for the next day. And if you could tackle even just the first thing before going into reactive mode, checking email, checking social media, you're going to be so much farther ahead because now you've built this like habit of being proactive. And there's a reason why it's like habit number 1 in the 7 habits of highly effective people. And so many people fail to do it. Like we just live our lives in reactive mode, putting out fires, responding to other people's agendas. But if we can move our own agenda forward, like we're going to be so much farther ahead. So it's a really, really important nightly habit where I have my 3-question journal. It's like back on the shelf, but it is what I get done today, right? I'm going to celebrate my wins. What progress did I make today? Did I do work that mattered? Was this important? What am I grateful for? And you start to, as you practice this, you start to notice more and more moments throughout the day. Like, oh, this was kind of a cool thing that happened. And then the last thing is, how am I going to win tomorrow? What are my top priorities for the next day? So when the day starts, I don't have this ramp up period. It's like, no, I know what to do and in what order, and I can go get that done.
That's cool. What was like, can you give me an example of what was today's number 1 priority for you?
Well, today was recording. First priority for today is getting the newsletter drafted for tomorrow. So that is not done yet because we've had a couple of recordings today, but it will get done before the end of the day.
That's fair. Kind of final question on the execution piece here. How would you approach a side hustle differently if you knew it was something that you wanted to turn into a full-time hustle?
Oh, I like this one. This is where you need to be aware of, well, what hurdle am I trying to get to? What's my milestone? Is it a revenue number? Does it need to cover my expenses? Do you want to get it to the point where it's like fully replacing your day job income, which I think could be possibly, depending on what business it is, like pretty challenging to do if you're only doing it in 10, 15, 20 hours a week. There's a reason a full-time job, pays you as much as it does because it, takes up a lot of your time. But knowing what's the metric, like what am I shooting for? And then you'd be able to reverse engineer a little bit. Well, what's it going to take to get there? Is this path even possible to get there? And for me, it wasn't it hadn't cleared that hurdle of replacing my full-time income at the time, but it was making enough. And I had this track record of revenue going back 6 or 12 months, whereas like, it's what, some people are like, I hit it, 1 month out, I'm out. And it's like, do you have any proof that it's going to be consistent, that's going to stay there, right? So I wanted to see like several months worth of history where it was at least covering my expenses. So it wasn't going to dip into savings, wasn't going to have to take on extra debt, and I was confident with an extra 40, 50 hours a week freed up from the day job, like, okay, I could grow it to that income level and beyond. The other thing that might be worth considering is looking, trying to project out 3 to 5 years of like, okay, if I do this thing and it works, what is that a win for me? And the way you could do it is look at somebody who's been on a similar path 3 to 5 years ahead of you and say like, do they have a lifestyle that is appealing to me, or are they still working 80-hour weeks? Like, is there a little bit of time freedom and flexibility and financial security, or is it still a grind? Is it still a struggle, right? Because you want to pursue a path that has the right upside, or has the win, or has the pot at the end of the rainbow that you're looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you said something earlier in the conversation that really resonated with me, with like making sure there's enough margin there to hire somebody that can do that just as good, if not better than you. And I think that was probably a similar approach that I took whenever I was podcasting. Like, I didn't want to be a podcast editor forever. And I wasn't really looking to use podcast editing for a year just to make some additional income to hit a certain goal that I had in mind. I was really kind of approaching that side hustle as something that I wanted to turn into an agency. So we kind of, from the get-go, wrote down SOPs. We're always sourcing good contractors, and we're approaching our client relationships like they were going to be long-term. And I might do something different. Like, if I just needed some extra money because I'm saving for a wedding in a year and I want to do some podcast editing, sure, I might just like spin up a page on Fiverr and be doing more transactional work. But, I really took a little bit more methodical approach with this side hustle because I was like, you know what, I would love to serve 15, 20 clients in the lifestyle design that I currently would like to emulate. And I needed to put enough margin and find the right kind of clientele because of that.
Yeah. And it's a trade-off because it's like, well, I could probably make more if I just do it myself. But is that what I'm committing myself to doing long-term? Where it's like,
yeah,
is there a pricing rule of thumb you think about, like as an agency owner, where it's like, okay, my employee or my contractor, I got to pay him $25 an hour or her $25 an hour. So I got to charge the client. Like, is there a way you think about that spread?
Ooh, I would love to pick your brain about this a little bit, but my current approach right now, I want to keep all my contract cost under 30%,
Mm-hmm.
the additional cost on top of that under another 30%, and then have 40% of profit or margin left.
Yeah.
And we can kind of my brother and I can pick up work as needed on that front. And hopefully the margins are getting better and better over time. But I think that's just roughly what I'm shooting for. But I don't know. I don't necessarily have like a good rule of thumb, I think, on this.
Yeah, that's great. And early on, I was coming from a painting contractor world where like, oh, general contractor, make 10, 15% margin on, all the subs, like, good. That's a really thin margin in an agency type of business. And so what's far more common is to think of, cost of labor at 30 to 40%, maybe even 50%, like depending on what it is. It gives you a lot more breathing room to go do some marketing and investing and find the right people.
For sure. And it's nice whenever they fit into that model. I can kind of hire up at a better scale, especially in the world of video and audio editing. There is a ton of options that are out there, but not everyone's a really good fit, similar to like the red flags of really low pricing. I get some of those, and we want to vet out the right contractors. And when we only need 2 or 3 for our team, like, you want to make sure they're really good players and they're going to take care of the service that you're selling on that side. So I want to put in enough margin there to hire the right people if I need to. Yeah. Nick, this has been great. Man, I've really enjoyed the conversation. Side hustles are so fun. You've got an awesome show that talks all about side hustles. So if somebody is looking to look for some more ideas or just wants some motivation and inspiring stories, tell them what your podcast is and what they can expect if they check it out.
Yeah, we are the choose your own adventure of the side hustle world, where every week it's deconstructing a different business idea that somebody usually started on the side. Sometimes it's still on the side. Sometimes it's grown into a full-time thing. And it is a response to the curiosity of almost playing, entrepreneurial voyeurism of like, well, how'd you come up with that idea? How'd you get your first customers for that? How did you scale that thing? What's working on the marketing side? How'd you figure out how much to charge for that? Weren't you worried about the competition? Like all of these kind of questions that people who are sitting on the sidelines or trying to grow a business, would want to know before they enter into this specific business model. And it's been an absolute blast doing that for coming up on 12 years, which is just nuts, like 600 plus episodes. Would love to have you binge on the archives. I understand it's a big ask, but what you could do instead is if you hit hustle.show, you can answer a few short multiple choice questions and it'll build you like this 8 to 10 episode sampler platter playlist personalized to the answers that you gave. What are your side hustle goals? What are you into? How much time do you have? And then kind of hopefully point you in the right direction there. But yeah, I would love to have you tune into the Side Hustle Show and pick and choose the ones that are most interesting to you.
That's awesome. Nick, final question for you. If you had the opportunity to teach a 16-week class to a group of graduating college seniors on a topic that isn't normally covered in the classroom, what would you teach and how would you teach it?
16 weeks. I think it's a pretty serious topic.
Yeah, let's say you got an hour a week, so roughly 15, 16 hours that you're going to be teaching them. What topic interests you?
Yeah, it would probably be something in the personal finance world and really taking a holistic view of that. I was fortunate enough to have parents who encouraged responsible credit card use and building credit at an early age. I was lucky enough to have parents and teachers who encouraged investing and saving at an early age. And even my, high school math teacher was, I got to teach these kids exponents anyway, so I might as well teach them about, the power of compound interest and dollar cost averaging and all this stuff. But where he kind of stopped short was like, what's the end goal? And you've alluded to the FIRE movement. And he's like, well, if you do this and you plug in this amount per month, you're going to be a multimillionaire by the time that you retire. The question was never asked was, well, do you need multi-millions? Could you cut that short or could you accelerate? Like lots of different questions. So some sort of holistic finance program that tackles the spending side, that tackles the investing side, that tackles the earning side. It would be really interesting because I see a lot of people coming out of school without a clue. I remember watching did you see the Playing with Fire documentary?
No.
This was a documentary on the FIRE movement, chasing early financial independence. And, the guy at some point sits down at like 33 or 34 years old to like open up a Vanguard account or set up some kind of investment account. And my accounting friend who, was gracious enough to go to the movie with us, like in corporate finance his whole career, he's just like, are you kidding me? You're 34 years old and you've never, like, oh, you have to be, this has got to be a joke. He's just like smacking his head. But I think it's probably more typical than we believe.
I think it's super typical. I hear from people all the time. So actually our mutual friend, Andrew Giancola, he just posted yesterday, we had to learn how to write haikus in school instead of learning personal finance. And I reposted that, and the amount of responses that I got, like one of my friends reached out and he was like, yeah, I took a level 300 basket weaving class. He's like, I wish I would have just learned how to buy a house or how to do my taxes or how to start investing. There is such a plethora of things that we're just not set up to handle whenever we enter adulthood. And if we roll the dice and we get great parents or parental figures that can help and guide us, that's great. But many of us and many of our parents don't know how to do this either. So it's a roll of a dice.
Yeah, that's the things that are occupying brain space from school. It's like, yes, how to do a haiku for sure.
Once again, this is Nick Loper. He is the host of the Side Hustle Show, founder of the Side Hustle Nation. We'll put all the links that we talked about in the show notes. Nick, this was great. Thanks so much for joining me.
You bet, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Hey, before you go, I want to hear from you. You probably picked up that I'm pretty passionate about side hustles. Having one has given me the confidence that if anything ever happens with my money, I can always earn more. My own side hustle hasn't been life-changing, but it's brought in some nice extra cash. Last year, I made $9,700 selling plant cuttings, flipping furniture, and helping people get rid of the stuff they didn't want. That's nearly $10,000 that I didn't have to take from my brokerage account, and money I can use for a couple extra vacations. The best part is, I actually enjoy doing it. So what about you? What side hustle are you thinking about starting? Is something holding you back? shoot me an email at justin@fiminded.com. Nick and I would love to help you brainstorm ways to get started. And if you already have a side hustle, I want to hear from you too. I'll be putting together a future episode with stories from listeners, and I'd love to include yours. Thanks again for listening. Catch you in the next episode.